Okay, it's now about 5 minutes after 8. I think we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Scott Williams. I'm the Membership Director for the League of American Bicyclists. I've been with the League since April and have started to have the opportunity to meet some of you in various formats by phone or in person, and I am very much enjoying that. It's great to have this interest from clubs for this presentation tonight. The clubs are a very important part of what the League does and a real base of our support and what we're able to accomplish around the country. So it's exciting to be able to provide this service. This is the very first club leadership webinar. Late last year we had a club leadership training in Boca Raton, and this spring we held one in Milwaukee. We're still planning to hold some in-person club leadership events because we do feel there's a lot of value to getting people together and allowing them to interact, since I'm not really allowing you to interact here yet tonight. So we're still planning to do that, but at the same time, we felt like the opportunity to provide this kind of programming across the country and to people who aren't able to travel to the events was a great opportunity, and we wanted to try this out. So again, we're piloting this web format. It's the first time. I hope you'll be patient as we try to figure out the hand thing and the question thing and the best way to format a program like this so you get the most out of it. So as I was saying, all the attendees are muted by default to help minimize background noise and other distractions. And so again, if you signal that you want to have a question when Mary stops, I will call on you, and then you'll be able to answer your question. She's going to break often to allow questions or comments. And if a lot of hands go up, I will let her know that we need to take a break because people do have questions. Once the formal program is finished, I'll unmute a lot more liberally to allow for freer conversation. This is one of the points where you're going to have to bear with us as we figure out just what works, and if we unmute everybody at the same time, whether there's chaos. And we're still trying to find out a good flow of these events. We're recording the event. I remembered to turn the recording on before I started talking, and it should be available on our website tomorrow if you missed any of the content or want to share the program with others. I do want to thank our generous sponsor, SRAM, who sponsored the in-person club leadership trainings as well as the webinars that we're doing the rest of this year. And I think that is all the business to get out of the way early. Before we get started, I would like to introduce Mary Dirks, who's the past president of the Twin Cities Bicycling Club, and she's here tonight to talk to us about leadership recruitment, development, and succession. And I am going to suavely press some buttons here to give Mary control of the screen, close out this poll, and we are underway. Mary, you ready to go? You there?
Yes, I am. Just 1 second here while I... Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
They can't really answer.
Okay, you can see it, Scott.
I can see it.
Okay, great. So as Scott mentioned, my name is Mary Dirks. I'm the past president of the Twin Cities Bicycling Club. I'm excited to be here again. I've been involved with the last two club leadership conferences, and as Scott mentioned, they're a great venue and opportunity for clubs to get together and share best practices. So I've learned a lot, and I'm excited to be a part of this one as well. A little background about myself. I've been on the board of TCBC for 6 years. I rolled off as president this past year. I spent 2 years as a general board member, 2 years as the club's vice president, and then 2 years as the president of the club. Okay, little technical difficulty here. Sorry about that. Okay, so a little bit of background about TCBC. We're a recreational bicycling club based in Minneapolis, St. Paul, 501c3 nonprofit corporation. We're probably a little larger than the average club. We're about 1,700 members. We do about 2,000 rides annually and have had a lot of growth over the past 10 years or so. Most are single-day rides. We do one annual fundraising type ride. We have about 180 ride leaders that lead rides for the club, 40 key volunteers, and we define a key volunteer as kind of our membership director, sponsorship chair, our web team, our treasurer, that type of thing. We have no paid staff, and we have a $100,000 annual budget. What I would say as we go through the presentation, this may be larger than your club, but all of this information is scalable. So maybe at this time, Scott, if you want to share the results of the survey that, the poll that you took prior to starting.
Okay. Well, here's the how big is your organization poll. Looks like we've got some big groups here.
So can you share what that is, Scott? I'm not able to see it on my screen.
Oh, you didn't see it. Okay. The size of the organizations, we had 7% of our attendees, 1 to 25 member clubs. 14% had 51 to 100 member clubs. 36% had 101 to 250 members, and 43% were in organizations of 251 or more members. And for the position in the organization, 38% president, 38% other officer, 8% are past officers, and 31% board members. And I let people answer multiple times. So that's why it adds up to a little bit more than 100%.
Okay, that's great. Can you hear me again?
Yep.
Okay, great. So, so it looks like some larger clubs this time, and at least a third of the folks are president, and another third are other officers of the club. So with that, we'll get into the subject matter of tonight's webinar, which is leadership transitions and succession planning. So first off, we'll talk a little bit about succession planning. You've got an organization, and you're trying to figure out how do you continue to keep the club running as smoothly as it currently is. One thing I would say here is, to take inventory of where you're currently at, and so look at your current board and determine what their interest is in the future. Are they interested in becoming an officer? Are they interested in staying on for more than a year or two? Are they interested in just being a general board member, and try to get a sense from them earlier versus later in terms of what their interest is in future board and officer positions. If there's a potential interest by maybe your membership director or your web team or someone like that, if they're interested in the board, it also gives you a chance. If you know enough in advance, you can backfill those roles in the interim while you're planning for these folks to roll onto the board. So again, the biggest thing here is just to be forward-looking and determine what your current board makeup is and what their interests are. It may fail. Folks may have interest in staying on, but other things may come up and it may not work, and they may end up not staying on. But in any case, the planning is key here. So in terms of board member selection, where do you find folks? How do you go about it? Again, one of the key things here is to solicit well in advance. One of the things we learned is in our bylaws it states that 60 days prior to the annual meeting, a nominating committee needs to be formed. And what that really meant to us is if the newsletter is due for October, or if the newsletter in October needs to have the names of the potential board member candidates, then we need to kind of plan around that. And that just didn't give us enough time and didn't allow adequate preparation for determining new board members. So what we did is we made that nominating committee an ongoing committee. So there's a team of people that is kind of constantly assessing or talking to people, determining and assessing their interest in being on the board, so that when it comes time for looking for new board members, we've got some potential names out there. In terms of other methods for soliciting board members, we recently implemented an online membership system, which we found to be very helpful. And what that does is, one of the questions we ask is, what types of interests do you have in terms of volunteering for the club? And we list, pretty much everything we can think of, and one of those is board membership. So some folks that, you reach people that you may not reach otherwise, because the tendency sometimes is to think about the people that you know versus those that you don't. So it's a good way, too, to get new blood in the organization by kind of reaching out to folks in that way. In terms of, orienting folks, or if people's express interest, we've asked them to come to board meetings so that they can get a sense of what goes on. Some people have an idea that we talk a lot about the rides that we've been on and that type of thing, and aren't really aware of the number of business items that are discussed at the board meeting. So it's helpful for folks to come to the board meetings ahead of time if they're interested in being on the board, so they get a true sense of what the board being on the board is like. And then another item is, asking members when they join or renew and if they're interested in being on the board. And again, that's part of our online membership system, and I know there's another webinar on that topic, so I'm not going to get into that in any more detail. We also put articles in our newsletter. We have a monthly and sometimes semi-monthly e-news online newsletter that goes out as another way of asking for potential interest in board members. We also encourage our key volunteers to run for the board. They've had a lot of experience with the club, and there's lower risk there because you know those folks. Another option is to utilize outside organizations to find leaders. We have an organization here, and I'll talk about it a little bit more later as well, MAP for Nonprofits, basically a statewide nonprofit organization. And if you're interested in filling a board position, they have that's one of the services that they provide, and folks from any area can go in and look at potential board positions that are available. And it also helps too if you kind of have a sense of what skills you're looking to fill on the board. Are you looking for somebody with a systems background or marketing background, or if you look at the makeup of your board, what types of skills and abilities are you looking for, if there's something in particular that you're looking for.
I think we do. I'm sorry. We do have a question. If now's a good chance. Okay, Tony, did you have a question? Tony, are you out there? Okay, we'll get back to that. Sorry. Go ahead, Mary.
Okay. Another thing that's helpful is to have staggered board terms so that all the folks don't roll off the board at the same time. The way our board is structured is that we have a 9-member board, half of the positions expire every 2 years. There's a 6-year maximum tenure on the board. However, you can rejoin after taking 1 year off. Are there questions at this point?
Let's see.
Keep going.
Go ahead. Keep going.
Okay. Okay. New board member orientation. So as you get new people on, it's a new experience for them. So a couple things we've tried is, one, we encourage the people to read past meeting minutes so that they get a sense of what types of discussion items and initiatives have been discussed by the board over the past year or two, whatever it is. We also partner, as I mentioned, with a nonprofit organization. So this MAP for Nonprofits, they offer board training. So they have, I think they have board boot camp and advanced board boot camp and that type of thing. They've got a number of different classes and webinars on training to be on a nonprofit board. And what's interesting about that is it goes beyond the bike club, and it's looking at nonprofits in general, and so you get some good ideas from other types of organizations. And then we also do starting this year, we did a new board member orientation with both new and old board members, so that folks could kind of get oriented right away instead of taking longer to do the orientation. Okay, so the next section is on utilizing other resources in terms of transitioning functions and keeping the club running smoothly. What other options are out there, and one of them is to utilize other resources, whether that be outgoing officers, committees, other people within your organization or outside your organization. So if your board is fairly new, you may want to encourage past board members or the president or other officers to attend your board meeting to kind of have some continuity from 1 year to the next in terms of the business of the club. Also utilizing committees. Instead of having the whole board work on everything, break the board into various committees and incorporate some newer folks along with some more tenured people on each of the committees, so that as the folks that have been on longer roll off the board, you've got some continuity with the people that are newer to the board. And it also helps to spread the work around. You can accomplish more in a shorter time frame. We've used that method for ongoing tasks as well. Having committees doing the work, it just helps to spread the work around and no one feels overloaded. So, for instance, I mentioned we went to a new membership system. Having multiple people kind of manage that or have being responsible for pieces of that makes it a lot easier than having one person have kind of this large commitment. And I think people have a lot of things going on in their lives, and I think if the task is manageable time-wise, people are more apt to take it on. And then also just spreading the workload reduces risk. So if that person leaves, you've got some other folks that are familiar with it, and it's not quite as detrimental to lose a key committee person. Another area for outside resources is talents within your organization. Again, look outside of the board to help with other projects. They may help with projects that initiatives that the board has. And they can also help with some of these key positions in terms of membership and systems, newsletter items I've listed there. And then again, the last item under utilizing other resources is partnering with outside organizations. And again, what it does is it allows each organization to do what they do best. As I mentioned, we have this map for nonprofits. We also have Minnesota Council of Nonprofits, and maybe you have something similar in your state. But they offer not only board member training, but they offer some systems training. They have social media training. They've got just a lot of different types of training. They also have annual conferences. We have legal counsel through them. We pay a very low rate to have legal counsel through this nonprofit organization, and it's extremely affordable and very valuable and very helpful. They also have various consultants on staff. So as I mentioned earlier, we recently implemented a new membership system. We utilize one of their technical consultants to be on our project, and what it really did for us is it brought somebody on that had a much larger picture of system implementations overall. They've seen these things happen. They've seen what works, what doesn't work. They could steer us in the right direction. So while our team was very competent, without this person, this systems consultant from the nonprofit organization just really added another level of expertise, and we found that to be very valuable. So don't feel like you have to do it all within your own organization. Look to some of these other organizations. The League, obviously, is another great example. Their Traffic Skills 101 classes, their LCI program, their education programs, kind of goes back to, don't reinvent the wheel. They've already got these great programs. Partner with them, piggyback off of their programs, and utilize those programs. They're a great way to enhance your safety program in your club. And also look to other bike clubs. A few years ago, we implemented a new online calendar, and we got a list of bike clubs within the U.S. and just started looking at other clubs' websites, and we found this online calendar system that another bike club was using, and it's been a couple, 3 years. We're still using it. It works great. So I've been very happy with that, and that was also very inexpensive for us. So that look to others that have been there before or have done something similar in terms of tasks you want to accomplish. I think I'll break there. Are there any questions before I go on to the next area?
If you do have a question or a comment you'd like to make on what's been presented so far, please use your hand up button. I don't have any hands up right now. I'll give people just a minute. Okay, Corey.
Yes. I'd like to know more about this nonprofit organization. Is there a name? What would I look for in my own area?
I would probably just, for us it's Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. I would probably just search on statewide nonprofit resource organization or something along those lines. Service organization.
Okay, and when I call on you, if you haven't spoken yet, if you could just say, along with your name, what organization you're from. So, Corey, where are you from?
I'm from Lewiston, Idaho, Clarkston, Washington. Twin River Cyclists. We're a small organization, about 50 to 100 members.
Okay, great. Anybody else have a question before Mary continues? I've got no hands up right now, Mary,
Okay.
so go ahead.
Okay, so then the next area that's helpful in terms of transitioning or reducing workload is kind of part of what this is involved in as well, is moving towards centralized processing. Again, by having systems on shared servers or versus on someone's home PC reduces a lot of risk. Multiple people can access in order to share the workload. As our systems consultant on our other project had mentioned to us, it's not if your hard drive crashes, it's when. And that happened to our treasurer, and luckily it was like the 4th day into the month, so there wasn't a lot of recreating, but it did happen. So some examples of online centralized processing, QuickBooks, as I just mentioned, Ride Calendar, whether you use Google Calendar or some other calendar system or your online membership system. But we didn't want to get into a situation where we were maintaining databases and maintaining systems to, let those who know how to do that better than us do that, and that's why we kind of moved towards centralized processing with other folks, other organizations, hosting the system and doing the maintenance so that we're not bogged down with that. In terms of leadership transitions, it may seem sort of odd to have this here, but recognition is really key, as I'm sure many of you know, in an all-volunteer organization. It's very important to make sure that volunteers feel appreciated and valued in what they do. They're what make your organization run, and to the extent that people feel valued, I think that helps to keep folks on in their current positions and less likely to leave and move on to something else. Okay, so the last main area here in terms of leadership transitions is documentation. Basically, write it down, and there's kind of 4 key areas here. I'll go through each one of them in a little more detail. The first is policies and procedures, and again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, all of this is scalable. So basically what this is documenting all your key functions, including your board positions. So again, your membership director, your treasurer, your sponsorship chair, your newsletter editor, so on and so forth. Document those positions so that if there are transitions, I mean, eventually these people are going to leave or for whatever reason, hopefully there's a transition period where they can train them in, but that doesn't always happen. So work to have those positions documented. That was a challenge for us. What happened with us is we waited too long, and so if you're and we had a lot of them to do. So again, I mean, even if you only have 3 to do, I would start now and just do those. It's much easier to do 3 a year than to try to do 40 in a year or something like that. So, and you might think, well, I don't really have that much to write down. Well, it's start with what you have, and it's just easier to add on to that than it is to start from scratch and when there's much more to write down and that type of thing. So documenting the key functions in terms of what they do, when do they do it, what timelines are associated with their function, any documents that they have in their possession that need to be retained, that type of thing, and then store those on some central system where others can get access to them for updating, and then on an annual basis we update those each year, and the updating again is much easier than starting from scratch on something like that. And then kind of along with that is making sure that you've got key backups for each of these key functions, and so identifying who those are, documenting who those backups are, so that everyone on the board is aware of that, and then encouraging the person that performs the function to work with the backup to at least kind of walk them through what they do so that there's some familiarity with it instead of all of a sudden just picking up the document and the person that normally performed the function is no longer available to help. Another area is developing a master calendar, and all we did for this was put together an Excel spreadsheet. It had each month of the year listed across, in each of the columns, and then all of the key functions listed down the side, and with an indication as to who's responsible and what month you needed to address that particular issue. And again, even if you only have a small number of items, it's much easier to start with that and build on that than to wait until you've got a lot of things to do and then document all of those at once. So what this is really helpful for is when new people come on the board, they can look at that, and it's a nice document to look at kind of at a glance and see, okay, here are the key functions or key tasks that the board needs to be concerned about. Now, this isn't every last thing that goes on in the club, obviously. This is just things that the board needs to be aware of, making sure their insurance is up to date, or, planning your major, annual events, making sure you have a committee in place. It's not, making sure that the rest stop is there. That's the committee's job, but just some of the key functions that the board needs to be aware of, and for planning purposes. And so again, it really helps the board to kind of look at the bigger picture of the organization and see the types of things that need to be done and when they need to do them, so that things don't slip through the cracks. And then the next thing, kind of the last thing here, is developing a long-range plan. And we've all heard the saying, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And again, this helps to kind of guide the organization, starting with developing a mission and vision statement, and so that you have some guidelines in terms of who you are, and helping in decision making that you're doing. Also performing a SWOT analysis, which stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and just outlining what those are for your organization to kind of help guide where you want to go in the future, and what you're doing well, so that you continue to do that well, and what types of things that initiatives you want to have going forward based on the results of the SWOT analysis. Along the back in terms of the long-range plan, developing a 5-year plan with year 1 goals. And again, what this does is then each year the new board just updates that plan on an annual basis. And if you've got newer folks on, they can kind of look at what the plan is, what's been done, what the thinking was by that board, the past board for the next year or next 5 years or whatever. So again, it's a good planning tool for people that are joining the board to see what kind of the vision and the long-range plan is. So I've got a number of points there, and I think I've covered most of them. Yeah, and again, once the hard part on a lot of this is just doing it. The updating is a lot easier than starting from scratch. So again, once you do it, then you only need to update it annually and change as needed. And then encourage the board to include others, other key volunteers or other folks that may be beneficial to have in that planning session included, so that you can get the kind of the best results from your planning session. Some potential areas for a long-range plan, I just listed off the ones that we use: leadership, finance and operations, which is kind of your infrastructure of your club, safety, membership, outreach and education, communications, and promotion. One thing I would say is, just to be sure that you're realistic in what the long-range plan is, given that if you have a all-volunteer club as well, just being realistic in the long-range plan. This gets kind of detailed, but at the past conferences I attended, they had asked for some specific examples, so I just kind of jotted down some examples for each of these areas. So within leadership, some things you may want to consider for a long-range plan is developing a transition plan, or developing backups, more recognition, having a board member orientation session. Finance, how much, having X amount of cash in the bank by a date certain. Developing a budget. Maybe you haven't used a budget in the past, and so maybe that would be something you could do is have for a long-range plan is developing a budget and associated with cash amounts. Some of the other things we talked about earlier in terms of a calendar and online systems. Safety. Again, the TS 101 program that the league offers, having a safety campaign, tracking accidents. One thing we noticed when we started doing the long-range plan is we didn't really have a good benchmark for a lot of the things that we were working on. We didn't really know where we currently stood. So our year 1 goal in a lot of areas was just determine current state. We did a member satisfaction survey, just on the membership section, to just determine, are members satisfied or not, and how satisfied or dissatisfied are they, so that we can, have a benchmark for determining future satisfaction levels by members. So that was something that was we did a lot in our year one plan. We also had outreach and education as one of our main categories for a long range plan. Increasing the number of league cycling instructors. Working with local law. Enforcement on improving the image of cyclists, and then the whole communications promotion area, social media. We moved to a sponsorship package program instead of advertising and that type of thing. So these are just, like I said, at past conferences, folks have asked for some examples, so I just jotted some down here in case that's helpful to see that. So I think that is all I had. So at this time, if anyone has any questions, I'll try to answer them.
I don't have any hands up right yet, but I'll start unmuting people shortly. I did have some questions about the strategic planning piece that you were just talking about. I'm curious how you handled that strategic planning. When in the year did you do it relative to when your leadership transitions took place? How much time did you invest? Was it a retreat? Did you use an outside consultant? How did it actually happen? How did the rubber hit the road on your planning?
Sure, that's a good question. We actually do the annual planning session right when the new board takes office. We plan the date in advance of that because people's calendars get booked up. So our calendar runs November 1st to October 31st. So by this time of the year, we're picking a date for the annual, we call it an annual planning retreat. So we take a full Saturday or maybe 2 half days or something. And for us, I don't know where the other folks are from, but so I'm in Minnesota, and most of the work here in terms of club business gets done, in November through March or whenever it starts getting nice out. So, so it's definitely to our advantage to get started early on that, because, like I said, once summer comes in, then we want to ride because we have such a short riding season here. Like I said, we take either a full day, a couple half days. We have not utilized outside consultants at this point. But that would, certainly be something that would be very beneficial to have someone come in and kind of help guide the discussion in terms of, where the organization wants to go.
Now, I saw Mark's hand up. Do you still have a question, Mark? Are you there? Well, another just follow-up thought I have on the Mark did not have a question. On the strategic planning is when you do a plan like that and you come up with specific planks, one thing that I found is really important is to make sure that each one of the goals, such as the ones that Mary laid out there, each one is assigned to a certain person. Because if there's not a specific accountability and one person in charge of advancing those, I don't know if you said this already, Mary, but just making sure that there's a name assigned to each thing and get reporting from that person to how things are proceeding. If you just assign something to an entire board and no one in particular is responsible for it, the odds of it actually getting done decrease dramatically.
Good point. And what we did is we broke this down. We have a 9-member board, so we broke into teams of 3. And then, so on the screen that I've got up here, one team took leadership and finance and operations, another team took safety and membership, and then the other team took the last 2 categories. And then within each of those 3-person teams, we tried to, we asked people what teams they wanted to be on, and then based on their interests and kind of their tenure in the club, we formed the team so that we had some folks that had been on the board for a while, and along with some newer folks, so that we had we didn't have all newer or all more tenured people. So, but that's a very good point, Scott, about assigning accountability to someone. Then at each board meeting, then that team would report on the progress of their goals within their area.
Okay, another thing that I had a question about, experience working in other organizations, not in the bicycling sector, is it's a totally different problem. Maybe you haven't had it with Twin Cities. Is a leader who doesn't want to move along. I was involved with an organization sort of on and off for quite a number of years. There was a president who always complained and said he didn't want to step down, but then never quite got out of the way. And the organization was really stagnant, and the board turned over a lot because they got frustrated with that leader's fairly conservative approach to running the organization. And I just wonder if you have any thoughts on how to help move leaders along when it's time for them to go?
What we do is, we haven't really had that problem, but what we do is the board actually elects its own officers. So if I'm just trying to think, if there was a situation like that and maybe someone else was interested in being the president as well, the board elects the officer. So it's not necessarily a function of if that person won't step down. Although I will say it's not like there's lots of hands going up when the call for president comes. But does anyone else had experience with that type of thing?
I don't have hands up right now. I do have, I've got a hand now, but I'm going to ask a related question, then let me find out who's got their hand up. Tony says that we are an old club, started around 1975. Our average age is 60 years old. We have a hard time getting people to volunteer for any position, president or anything, it sounds like. How can we get members to become active again?
Some things that we've done along those lines are is to really break down the tasks into very small, manageable tasks. We found people are much more inclined to volunteer if it's a very finite amount of time, and and I know we'd all probably like that, but especially as you're looking to get new volunteers in. Our volunteer base maybe comes from our annual ride, perhaps, or doing kind of small functions, and then from there they kind of get interested and meet other people that do volunteer that are volunteering from the club. We also we have an annual volunteer appreciation picnic. We do in the summer, and then in the winter we have a volunteer recognition dinner. We give people a jacket or something that they can wear or have that has our club name on it and says volunteer or ride leader on it. And that seems to kind of help people kind of feel included and want to volunteer more, to be recognized, I guess, is the overall thing, is to have the more you can recognize and appreciate people, the better. In our newsletter we do a recognition corner, so we highlight people that have done things for the club, no matter how small or large. It's for anybody that's been active in the club to be recognized. So those are the things that come to mind off the top of my head.
Okay, Alan, I think you had a question or a comment?
You talking to Alan?
Alan.
Yeah, okay, yeah. This is Alan Forkoch from Grizzly Peak Cyclists out in East Bay, California. Yeah, two things. One, when you were talking about trying to get people less active, I noticed you have a term limit, which, over the long term certainly helps, gives people a sabbatical and just sort of a forced sabbatical for a year, which is useful in turnover. Also, the comment about getting new recycling people, volunteers. One of the fundamentals in keeping the organization going is just getting new blood into the organization, and that's probably a topic for another webinar. But I know our club has had has some rides deliberately intended to bring new people into the club and get interested in it. That's all I have.
Okay, thanks.
And we've noticed with our online membership that's kind of increased the membership growth in the club. It's also getting some younger people in. We have a new member section of our website to kind of help people feel more included. We've started doing some new member rides just specifically for new members, and we do like I think it's a half an hour ride briefing, if you will, talking about a little bit about your bike, about safety, whatever, and then ride together so that people aren't left as soon as we leave the parking lot. So yeah, similar types of things.
We have another question. Rita from the Rocklands Bicycling Club in New York asked for any suggestions from the smaller clubs on how to cover all the bases where there's a limited and smaller pool of key volunteers to get the work done. Any thoughts on that, Mary, or anybody else? Jim? You there, Jim? I see Jim's hand going up a lot, but I don't seem to be able to unmute him. I'll look and see if there's... So, Mary, do you have any thoughts on smaller organizations?
What my thoughts on that would be, I think it's important for the board to kind of helps in the soliciting of volunteers and talking with people and encouraging them to get involved, as opposed to putting something in a newsletter or in an e-news. I mean, those are helpful tools as well. But to go on various rides, maybe rides that you don't normally go on, and kind of talk to folks about volunteering and find out what their interests are first, and then maybe if they've got some systems background, then kind of that may lead into, oh, we've got a need in our club for such and such, and it's an ongoing process, and even in a large organization, I mean, we're always kind of constantly trying to get volunteers, and we've recently added a position as our volunteer coordinator whose role is to kind of help solicit volunteers. And I would say probably one of the things that's been most helpful for us is, and I don't mean to keep talking about this online membership system, but at a glance now we know what 1,700 people are interested in. Do they want to volunteer? Don't they? What's their background? What we ask what their profession is when they join or renew the club. What's your profession? We list a bunch of different things. Then we ask for what we call special skills and talents, and we list a number of different things that would be of value to our club, so that when we're in need of a certain type of position, then we just query that database and pull those people and contact them and say, you recently indicated you were interested in volunteering, or just, we noticed you have a background in X and we're really in need of Y, and would you be able to help out? And so that's really been a useful tool for us, because, before that, it's like you would kind of go to the folks that you normally went to, and someone mentioned it earlier, you keep recycling volunteers, and while it's great that you have those volunteers to recycle, they're going to burn out eventually, and you don't get any new blood in the club. So for us, that online system has really helped to find people that we may not have found otherwise in the areas that we were looking for. And that can work if you're a small organization or a large organization.
One thing that I've found in working in other organizations is there can be a really delicate balance between harnessing the energy that a volunteer has for a certain task, and you really want to give them something they're excited about, versus covering the essential tasks or even guiding them to something where you feel like they're going to have a bigger chance of success, as opposed to taking on some grand plan that doesn't seem all that useful or likely to succeed. So they put a lot of energy into something, aren't rewarded, and don't come back. So I don't know if that's exactly a question, just a thought on something that I've observed as an art. We have Phil Morton, who I believe is also with Grizzly Peak Cyclists, asks, we have a few members who do a lot of different things. How do we get key volunteers to break tasks into smaller tasks? Some of them seem very vested in holding a position, and it's a bit hard to pry them out. Sort of related to the question I had posed earlier, I guess, but not so dire as the entrenched president.
We had that same issue, and I would relate it to when we were trying to get folks to document their processes. There's very much a sense of ownership by people in the work that they do, and so I think in part why we had some difficulty in getting the task done is people like knowing that they're the only one that knows how to do this, and that there's some value in that to them. One thing we've done is for new projects, we right off the bat said we're having a team of people. So like right now we have a membership team instead of a membership coordinator, a web team instead of a web coordinator, director, if you will. We've also just really encouraged our key volunteers we've asked for each position to have a backup, but really just stress the value to the organization, and just said, this isn't personal, this isn't, any of that. It's that if you leave for whatever reason, we need someone to be able to fill that role, and so we need some backup. And if you take a vacation or whatever it is, the organization needs to continue to run smoothly. And we've really just tried to, approach it from that perspective, because that's really what it's about. Is it's the value to the organization, and you don't want the organization to fail, and just kind of stressing that. And I think people can relate to that.
Okay, I have a question about Twin Cities Bike Club that came up earlier on. Jeff Kurtak was surprised that Twin Cities Bicycle Club was a 501c3, and bike clubs are usually 501c7s, an important difference. Those are the IRS tax codes governing the nonprofit. I don't know how much you know about that or could speak to that, Mary.
That's not really, I don't really know much about that, to be honest with you. So I do know we're a 501c3. I'll definitely talk with our tax guy and just get a better understanding of what the differences are between the two. Does anyone know what differentiates a C7 from a C3? Okay.
Yep, here's Jeff. Whoop. Hold on, I'm trying to get you unmuted here. Jeff, are you there?
This is Jeff Kurtak. A 501c3 is a charitable organization to which you can donate money and take a tax deduction. A 501c7 is an organization usually for recreational purposes, like a bicycle club, which itself is nonprofit and doesn't pay taxes, but cannot give the donors a tax deduction.
Okay.
So this might just be, I'm going to bet you're actually a 501c7. To be a 501c3 requires a bunch of hoops to jump through, and you have to make sure you don't spend any money on things like, giving rewards to leaders.
Even if it's just a jacket?
A 501c3 is important because people who give you money can take a tax deduction for the money they give you. Now, I doubt that your members are going to try to take a tax deduction for their membership fee,
Sure.
But that's what a 501c3 gives you, is that they can take that deduction.
Okay.
So somebody in your organization is filing a tax return. You've got over $100,000 a year in revenue, so you have to file a tax return. And,
Yep, yeah, we've been filing for a number of years. Yep.
right. And whoever that is checks the right box. You might just want to touch base with
Sure.
her and
Okay.
find out what she does.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. We have a couple of questions here that actually lead us into the next webinar. Someone was asking about the centralized online processing, how much it costs for centralized online processing of membership. And I am just not going to let Mary answer these questions, because that's exactly the topic of our next webinar, which we're doing on, I think, October the 5th. And I just found out Mary has a conflict with that. But right now it's scheduled for October the 5th with Mary, Ron Hewitt from Kansas City, and Dan Ehrman of Club Express. All of them use different membership systems. Dan runs the company which offers Club Express. Mary and Twin Cities use Z2 Neon, and while Ron and Kansas City use Wild Apricot, which is another system. And let's see, Jeff, is your hand up again or still? Did you have something else to add, Jeff?
No, my hand is not up.
Okay, sorry about that. And so that'll be October 5th again at the 8 o'clock start time, unless Mary convinces me to change it. And you'll find out more about registering for that in due course. I have a few more questions here I got distracted by. Rita from Rockland's Bicycle Club says Jeff is right on the distinctions between 501c3 and C7. If you're raising money for buying bikes for kids or such, your donors do want tax deductions. Earlier on, someone had suggested for documentation, I think I shared this question with everybody, having a wiki helps. I don't know if that's anything that most of you are familiar with, but it is a system that makes it easy to format and structure online documentation, and information like Wikipedia, but it can be something that you limit to just a few people. I was saying in response that since I started at the Bike League, we've been using a wiki for internal documentation of processes, especially as we implemented our own major membership system, which we've been doing since I came on in April. And just getting in the habit from day one, whenever you do something, check it against the documentation that's there or write it up, and that's actually part of the task, is documenting how you do that task. And I am looking to see what other questions we have. Jim wants to know, how does a club run 4,000 rides per year?
It's actually 2,000.
I'm still impressed. Why don't you tell us how you can run 2,000 rides per year?
It starts with, people will say there needs to be more rides in my area. Well, all of us are volunteers, so then we just encourage folks to, become a ride leader. We have kind of a formal program. It's a one-day session to become a ride leader, and then so they attend that, and then now there are rides in their area. So that's one of the ways that have worked to get more ride leaders. And for us, it's just kind of fed on itself. There's just a lot of good energy right now in terms of riding, and so people are, there's just some friendly competition going on with rides, and we used to have a guy in our club. He passed away last year, but he was in his late 70s, and he really just took members under his wing, and he called them ambassadors, and kind of acted as a ride leader, and then he would encourage them to take the ride leader class, and so there's just a lot of mentoring going on by people, especially him, in terms of trying to get other ride leaders to join or to be ride leaders. So.
Okay, that sounds good. I see Mark's hand up. Mark, do you have a question or comment? Are you there? I think he's just sent his question in. Please give your website address again. I think that's directed to you. I think everybody here knows bikeleague.org. What about the Twin Cities Bicycling Club?
It's www.biketcbc.org. I got it right up here. Oh, my trial period of my virus is going to end soon. Okay, so there's our website.
Okay, great. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments they'd like to share? Otherwise, I think we will start to wrap things up. Last chance for hands up or typing in a question. I want to thank Mary so much for joining us for this session. Mary, I'm sure, will be back for future webinars and presenting on other topics, sharing her knowledge with us. This was our first one. I hope you felt it went well. I will be sending a follow-up survey to everyone in the next couple of days to get your feedback, ideas for future sessions. As I was mentioning a few minutes ago, on October 5th, currently scheduled, is our membership session, described as getting and retaining members is important in addition to managing and tracking your membership. The webinar on October 5th will address membership databases, newsletter printing, and distribution, maintaining members only in public websites, and the pros and cons of anniversary versus annual membership. And they'll be discussing recruiting new members as well. On November 3rd, Ron Pewitt of the Kansas City Bicycling Club will be discussing budgeting with us, and that'll be the end of our trial for the end of 2010. We'll be scheduling some of these for early 2011, assuming the feedback is all good or all constructive, and we still have interest for those sessions. And I want to mention again that these webinars are brought to our member organizations at no charge, thanks to a grant from SRAM. Anything else that you would like to add before we go, Mary?
Nope. I just like to thank everyone for participating, and hope you enjoyed the session.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing what you know with us. I've gotten a lot of positive comments coming in through the questions, and I'll forward those to you. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. Everybody have a great night.